I still remember the sound of twisted metal groaning as I backed my truck away from what used to be the Pinewood Estates HOA security gate. The steel frame lay mangled on the pavement, sparks still flickering from where the electrical components had torn loose. The entire HOA board stood there in stunned silence, their monthly meeting interrupted by what they'd later call an act of vandalism. I calmly stepped out of my truck, dusted off my hands, and looked Karen Peton straight in the eye. "Now we're even," I said with a tone as level as a carpenter's rule. "Let me back up and tell you how I ended up ripping agate off its hinges on a Tuesday evening in suburban Colorado. My name's Jake Sullivan, and I've lived in Pinewood Estates for 12 years. When I first moved here, it was a quiet neighborhood with reasonable people who minded their own business. That all changed when Karen Peton became HOA president 3 years ago. I just finished restoring a 1978 Airstream camper, a real beauty with polished aluminum siding that caught the sunset like liquid mercury. After 6 months of weekends spent replacing flooring, rewiring electrical systems, and buffing out 45 years of oxidation, I finally had her looking factory fresh. I parked it on the gravel lot beside my house, the same lot where I kept my boat for a decade without a single complaint. The gravel lot sits entirely within my property lines, separated from a main driveway by a row of blue spruce trees I'd planted myself. It's not visible from the street unless you're actively trying to peer through the evergreens. But Karen Peton has a talent for finding problems where none exist. The very next morning, after parking my Airstream, I heard the distinctive click-clack of Karen's heels on my driveway. She stood there in her powder blue pantsuit, clipboard in hand, examining my camper like it was a crime scene. "This needs to go," she announced without so much as a good morning. Her voice had the practiced authority that comes from years of bossing around retail employees. "Good morning to you, too, Karen," I replied, not looking up from my coffee. "And no, it doesn't need to go anywhere. It's on my property." Her face benched tighter. If that was even possible. It violates neighborhood ethics. Rule 17 for clearly states that all recreational vehicles must be steered out of sight. I set down my mug slowly. "Karen, Rule 17 applies to vehicles parked on the street or in driveways visible from the road. This lot is neither. It's screened by trees and set back 40 feet from the property line." She scribbled something on her clipboard with unnecessary force. "The HOA board will be reviewing this violation at our next meeting. I suggest you move it voluntarily before we're forced to take action. I suggest you review the actual covenants before threatening homeowners," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Have a wonderful day, Karen." She stormed off, her heels punching angry little holes in my lawn. I thought that would be the end of it. I dealt with Karen's power trips before. Like when she tried to find me for having the wrong shade of beige on my mailbox each time. A quick reference to the actuarials sent her scurrying back. To find a new target, I figured this would be not a friend. 3 days later, I came home from work to find my gravel lot empty. Deep gouges in the gravel showed where something heavy had been dragged. A bright orange notice was taped to my front door. "Vehicle removed for HOA violation. Contact Ace Towing to retrieve. Storage fees apply." My hand shook as I read the notice. Not from her, but from pure, undiluted rage. I dressured that Airstream with my own hands. Every rivet, every seal, every inch of that trailer held hundreds of hours of my work, and they'd hired some company to drag it away like abandoned junk. I called Ace Towing immediately. The guy who answered sounded bored until I mentioned Pinewood Estates. "Oh yeah, the silver trailer. HOA president said it was abandoned at property. We've got it here, but their salary to 100 in storage fees. Goes up 50 a day. That trailer was on my private property," I said through gritted teeth. "You trespassed and stole it." His tone shifted to defensive. "Hey, we just got where the work order says. Take it up with your HOA. We'll keep it safe until you pay the fees." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer friend, Tom Morrison. After explaining the situation, he laughed. "Not a happy law, but the kind that meant someone had screwed up badly. Jake, pull your property deed and send it to me. If what you were saying is true, they've got major problems. That evening, I marched into the HOA office in the clubhouse. Karen sat behind her desk, a smug smile playing on her lips. Mr. Sullivan, I assume you're here about your trailer. My legally parked camper that you had illegally towed, I corrected with a calm I didn't feel. You've committed theft, trespassing, and destruction of property. The gouges in my gravel alone are worth $1,500 in damages. She waved her hand dismissively. The HOA has discretionary authority to maintain board standards. Your camper was an eyesore. Discretionary authority? I repeated slowly. Tell me, Karen, where exactly does it say you can interpret property and remove personal belongings? Her smile faltered slightly. The board voted unanimously. Aesthetic violations can be remedied by any means necessary. Did the board also vote to pay for the lawsuit I'm about to file? I asked with a tone sweet as antifreeze because my attorney is very interested in your interpretation of property law. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. But Karen Baton didn't become HOA president by backing down. Sue, if you want, the HOA has lawyers. Two, in the meantime, your trailer stays impounded. I left without another word. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That night, I dove deep into property records, HOA documents, and local ordinances. What I found made me laugh out loud at 2 in the morning. My property, including the gravel lot, predated the establishment of Pinewood Estates by 15 years. When the neighborhood was developed, my lot was grandfathered in with specific exemptions. The HOA covenants explicitly stated they had no authority over pre-existing structures or usage. My gravel lot wasn't just exempt from their aesthetic rules. It was exempt from their jurisdiction entirely. But their algem was in the county ordinances. Unauthorized removal of vehicles from private property constituted theft. The HOA wasn't law enforcement. They had no more right to tow my camper than I had to walk into Karen's house and take her television. Tom confirmed my findings next morning. Jake, they're in serious trouble. We're talking criminal trespassing, theft, and conspiracy. Federal companies liable, too, for not verifying ownership. I want my camper back today, I said firmly, and I want compensation for damages. We can file charges and sue, Tom assured him. They'll fold quickly once they realize their exposure. But as I drove to work that morning, passing the HOA Spristing clubhouse with its ornate security gate, a different idea formed. Karen had used her perceived authority to take my property. She'd hidden behind HOA rules that didn't even apply. Maybe it was Tom. Someone showed her what unauthorized property removal really felt like. I retrieved my camper that afternoon, paying the bogus fees to avoid storage damage while Tom prepared the lawsuit. The tow company had scraped its side, pulling it over my gravel, leaving gouges in the aluminum I'd spent weeks polishing. Another $1,000 in damage to add to the tally. But instead of going home, I drove to the hardware store. I bought the heaviest duty tow chain they sold along with a set of D-rings rated for 10,000 pounds. Then I went them and hitched my camper in midway in full view of the street. Let Karen stew on that. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening. I knew Karen would be there with her board plotting their next move. What they didn't know was that I had already won. Tom had sent a demand letter that morning outlining their criminality. But I wanted to make a point they'd never forget. At 7:30 that Tuesday, I drove my truck to the HOA clubhouse. The parking lot was full, the meeting in full swing behind the building's glass doors. The security gate stood closed, its electronic keypad glowing in the dusk. I'd built similar gates before. 5,000 pounds of pull would pop it right off its tracks. I hooked my tow chain to the gate's main support beam, the heavy links clanking against the metal. Through the clubhouse windows, I saw heads turn at the sound. I climbed back in my truck, put it in reverse, and floored it. The gate didn't stand a chance. Metal shrieked as the support posts ripped from their concrete mowings. Electrical components sparked, and popped as wiring tore loose. The entire assembly crashed onto the pavement, dragged 20 feet before I stopped. The whole board poured out of the clubhouse, Karen leading the charge. Her face had turned the color of a ripe tomato. "What have you done?" she shrieked in a voice that could shatter glass. "You've destroyed our property. I'm calling the police right now." I stepped out of my truck calmly, surveying the mangled gate, HO property. I asked with mock concern. I thought it was abandoned. I was just cleaning up an eyesore, maintaining neighborhood standards. This is vandalism. Karen sputtered, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. "You'll pay for this. You'll be arrested just like you paid for trespassing on my property." I pulled out my own phone, showing her photos of the damage to my lot and camper. "Or maybe we should discuss the theft charges my attorney filed this morning." The other board members exchanged nervous glances. Bob Harwick, the treasurer, stepped forward hesitantly. "Karen, what's he talking about? What F charges?" I smiled at Bob. "Didn't Karen tell you? She had my camper illegally towed from my private property that's exempt from HOA jurisdiction. According to your own covenants, my attorney says it's textbook theft and trespassing." Karen's face cycled through several shades of purple. The board voted. "We have discretionary authority. No, you don't," I said firmly. And every board member who voted for the towing is now potentially facing criminal charges. "Hope you all have good lawyers." The sound of sirens interrupted our discussion. The police cruisers pulled up, officers stepping out with hands on their belts. Karen rushed to them immediately. "Officers, this man destroyed our security gate. Arrest him." The lead officer, a veteran named Sergeant Williams, whom I'd met before, surveyed the scene. "Sir, did you get this gate?" "I did," I admitted calmly. "After the HOA illegally entered my property and stole my camper. I was retrieving property that was wrongful litigation just like they did." I handed him copies of my property deed, the whole covenants, and the relevant ordinances. As he read, his expression grew more serious. "Mom," he said to Karen, "according to these documents, you had no authority to remove anything from this man's property but the aesthetics." Karen protested weakly. "The neighborhood standards are not laws." Sergeant Williams finished. "Sir, while I can't condemn destroying the gate, I understand y'all have a legitimate grievance. I suggest you both handle this through attorneys. Already in progress," I assured him. "I'll pay for the gate repair as soon as they pay for trespassing, theft, and damaging me property. Fair is fair." The next 12 weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, angry emails, and emergency HOA sessions. The story hit the local news after someone posted a video of Met dragging the gate. Local man takes stand against overreaching HOA became theft feel good. Story of the month, the tow company, facing liability, threw Karen under the bus immediately. They prodded Seth work order she'd signed, claiming the camper was abandoned property on HOA common grounds. It was a blatant leaf that opened her up to fraud charges on top of everything else. The HOA's insurance company, seeing the liability, forced a settlement. They paid for all damages to my property, plus punitive damages that Tom negotiated to as satisfying 5 figures. But that wasn't the best part. At the emergency home meeting, 3 weeks after the Gatane incident, homeowners packed the clubhouse. Word had spread about Karen's abuse of power. And this wasn't her first offense. Stories came out of legal fines, made-up violations, and years of petty tyranny. The vote to remove her as president was unanimous, except for one, Karen herself. She stood at the podium, her usual composure completely shattered. "You can't do this," she cried with a voice breaking from disbelief. "I've run this HOA for 3 years. I've maintained our standards. You've maintained a dictatorship," Bob Harwick said quietly. "And it ends now." But the final blow came the next morning. Karen worked as a real estate agent for Coldwell Banker, trading on her HOA president status to seem connected and powerful. When news of theft, criminal charges, and lawsuit hit, her broker called her in for a meeting. It heard about it from Tom, who knew Simeon at the firm. They couldn't have an agent facing fraud charges. It was bad for business. Karen was given that choice. To resign or be fired, she chose her resignation. But the damage was done. Word spreads fast in real estate circles. The district attorney ultimately declined to prosecute, calling it a civil matter. But the threat had been enough. Karen's reputation in Pinewood Estates was destroyed. Her real estate career weighs of her. The last I heard, she'd moved to her sister's place in Wyoming as fourth criminal charges, while the district attorney passed on prosecution. This civil case was enough to ruin her. Theft final settlement required her to pay $35,000 in damages and legal fees. When she heard the number in court, her face went white as paper, and she swayed on her feet like she might faint. $35,000, she whispered in a broken voice. But I didn't have. The judge's gavel cut hair off, and that was the last time anyone in Pinewood Estates saw Karen Peton in any position of authority.